Well, the coaster wars of the early 2000s have slowed down, but is there hope we could ever see a coaster over 500 feet? I love to dive into this question. Thanks for joining. I invite you to please consider subscribing and liking. Thank you so much. Let's dive in. Growing up as a kid and roller coaster enthusiast in the 90s and early 2000s, I didn't realize what a special time that was in the history of coasters. As Magnum XL 200 opened up in 1989, the coaster wars began as parks began to see who could build the tallest and fastest coaster. I remember as a kid seeing Magnum XL 200 on the TV screen, the first coaster to break the 200-foot barrier, and when I finally got to ride it, it was amazing. It was like I was flying right next to Lake Erie. Then, as the new millennium approached, the unthinkable was being planned by Cedar Point as they would debut Millennium Force, the first coaster to be over 300 feet tall. I remember visiting Cedar Point that year in the year 2000. I was there at Coaster Mania, the roller coaster enthusiast event, and it was so awesome to stand in line for Millennium Force and to look and to see that huge tower of a lift hill. When I rode it, it just felt like we were going up so high. I remember again looking down, seeing the water to my left, and being so afraid. It was amazing. Then later that year, Steel Dragon 2000 opened up, breaking the world record again. And then only 2 years later, in 2002, a mysterious structure started to be constructed on Cedar Point's land. I remember way back then looking on the internet, seeing pictures that people were taking, speculating what could that mysterious structure be? How high is it going to go? Is it actually going higher than Millennium Force? And then Top Thrill Dragster, the world's first strata coaster, breaking the 400-foot record, was announced. It just seemed like year by year, park by park, there was this thirst for taller, faster, record-breaking coasters. Then in the year 2005, Six Flags Great Adventure opened Qiddiya, standing at 456 feet tall, traveling at 128 miles per hour. Qiddiya was the new world record holding coaster. And then silence. Qiddiya has now stood as the world's tallest roller coaster for 18 years. Will that record ever be broken? Well, in that 18 years, there has been some records broken. Of course, Formula Rossa at Ferrari World Park, it's broken the speed record, being at 149 miles per hour. It's faster than Qiddiya. Fury 325 is now the coaster featuring the world's tallest lift hill, but no coaster is taller than Qiddiya. Will we ever see a coaster beat the 500-foot record? In order for a 500-foot coaster to be built, 3 challenges would have to be overcome. 1, who would ride it? Would it be too scary? 2, who would buy it? What park would be able to pay for such a tall ride? And 3, who would build it? Not many manufacturers are capable or experienced enough to build such a huge ride. Yet I'm optimistic that these challenges could be overcome and we could one day see a 500-foot coaster. So let's dive into these challenges. First, who would ride a 500-foot roller coaster? Would the general public be too scared? I've heard that before, but I don't really think that's a real objection. For example, Qiddiya, standing at 456 feet tall, is only 44 feet shy of a 500-foot record-breaking coaster. But lots of people love Qiddiya. It's only a little bit shy of that 500 foot. People wait in line for hours to ride Qiddiya. People wait in line for hours to ride Top Thrill Dragster at 420 feet. So I don't think taking the ride just a little bit taller to 500 feet would scare the thrill seekers of the general public. Besides that, there have been rides that have been proposed that are taller than 500 feet, and they haven't worked out, but it wasn't because that people would be afraid of them. For example, Aero's Stratosphere Tower Fishhook Coaster would have dropped guests 700 feet. Or Orlando's Skyplex would have featured a roller coaster over 500 feet tall. So I don't think that the general public would be too afraid to ride a 500-foot coaster. But who would buy such a coaster? Who would have the right audience? Who could afford it? Who would have the physical space for this? Well, let's think about each of these. Who would have the right audience? Clearly, a 500-foot coaster wouldn't be right for every park. It would have to be a park that attracts thrill seekers. I think, for example, Cedar Point's demographic would respond well to a record-breaking 500-foot coaster. But what park could afford a 500-foot coaster? According to Wikipedia, Millennium Force costs $25 million, and Top Thrill Dragster also costs $25 million. Obviously, those two rides have much different experiences. Millennium Force, it has a large hill, but then it also has a long, expanded layout, whereas Top Thrill Dragster, all that money pretty much went into a launch, a big top hat, and then back down again. So a 500-foot coaster seems like it would be even more restrictive as to what the ride could feature, because so much expense would go into simply constructing the 500-foot hill. But could there be any creative solutions that parks could work with? Perhaps building off of some natural terrain, something like what Falcon's Flight is proposing to do. Could that help aid in the costs by taking advantage of a natural mountain? Or could a park build off of an existing structure, like the Fish Hook coaster was proposed to do at the Stratosphere Tower? Or this could be interesting, what if a coaster could reuse parts of a pre-existing coaster so they wouldn't have to pay for the entire new coaster all at once? This is an intriguing thought when we think about what Cedar Point may have in mind with Top Thrill Dragster. Could they somehow expand on the current Top Thrill Dragster in such a way that would allow them to go higher, maybe a reverse spike, but they wouldn't have to build a whole coaster from scratch? Or here's a crazy idea. What if Six Flags Magic Mountain took their Superman coaster, built an elevator vertical lift on the back of one of the two spikes of the current coaster that went all the way up to 500 foot tall? The ride would raise a car up to that 500-foot mark, and then it would crest down vertically using the current spike and most of the launch as this drop, 500-foot drop, and then a slowdown section. These ideas may be a little bit crazy, but I'm just trying to think of, if a park could not afford a 500-foot coaster from the ground up, are there kind of shortcuts that could get them there? Another concern would be, what park would have enough physical space to build a 500-foot coaster? Well, if a 500-foot coaster is primarily all in the drop, maybe this wouldn't be so hard. What if there was a creative solution here, such as an elevator lift? That wouldn't require a lot of square feet. If the ride is primarily the elevator lift and then a vertical drop or a steep drop, that could be most of the ride. Or if the ride was primarily that, maybe beyond that it was just low to the ground, track, curves, terrain, hugging elements, so there wouldn't be a lot of costs as far as structure would require. Even Cedar Point, I think, could think creatively in terms of where a structure like this could go. An alternative to an elevator lift could be Intamin's new vertical launch. That would be a really cool and thrilling way to go from the ground up to 500 feet above the ground, and it wouldn't take up a lot of square feet. So at this point, if we're just envisioning a coaster that has a vertical lift, a hill, and that's pretty much it, is it even worth it? Would it be better for a park to spend their money on a shorter coaster, but that would have more enjoyable elements, more variety? Well, I think that would be a question that each park would answer differently. For a park that doesn't have a lot of other coasters, it probably would be wisest for them to build a shorter coaster that could have more variety of elements. But for a park that already has a vast collection of different types of coasters, I think adding a 500-foot coaster, even if the hill is the main element, could be cool and would add a sense of diversity and a special feature to their park. Now, one challenge I see in a park building a 500-foot coaster is right now there simply doesn't seem to be the driving factor from a business perspective. There's not a competitor who's pushing to build this, and so there's no competition for this. People just seem to be satisfied with the coasters that we're getting. And I think back to the early 2000s when Cedar Fair was competing against Six Flags, who at that time was pushing out a lot of new coasters, and Paramount Parks existed separately. They were all competing, so there was this sense of, we got to build the bigger, the better, the taller, the fastest coaster. The climate's not quite the same. So what could trigger that Coaster Wars climate to start again? Well, again, I'm being optimistic, but what if a coaster like Falcon's Flight opened, broke world records? What if it did break the 500-foot record and it saw great success? If there was a great return on investment that Six Flags Qiddiya saw, maybe American parks or other parks around the world would see that, would see the response, and that could kick off, it would trigger the Coaster Wars, and we would see more and more coasters breaking height records. So if something like this were to happen, if the coaster wars were reignited, what parks would do well with a 500-foot coaster? Well, I think again, Cedar Point would work well. They are a thrill destination. They draw so many thrill seekers. And if they built a 500-foot coaster, I think they would see a lot of people come from across the country and even the world to ride a 500-foot coaster. We've talked about Six Flags Qiddiya opening up Falcon's Flight, which is proposed to be the world's tallest, fastest, and longest roller coaster. We'll see if this happens. If that does open, that would be awesome, and I hope it would have a great impact on other parks. Of course, there's other international parks that also may be interested in breaking a world record. What about other U.S. parks? Could we see any record-breaking coasters coming to a Six Flags park, with Six Flags CEO Salim Bissol mentioning that new rides is a part of his plan? Could we see, for example, at Six Flags Magic Mountain, a park that historically has been a key part within the roller coaster industry, could we see that park introduce any record-breaking coasters? Or if a 500-foot coaster were to be built at Six Flags Qiddiya in the form of Falcon's Flight, would Six Flags Great Adventure respond as Qiddiya's record would be broken by building a taller coaster? What about Six Flags Fiesta Texas under the great leadership of Jeff Siebert? Would that park be interested in building a 500-foot coaster? What about Carowinds? They currently have Fury, the tallest lift hill in the world. Maybe as Cedar Fair wants to invest in that park, there would become a time when they would want to build a record-breaking 500-foot coaster. Or what about independent attractions, like, again, the Fishhook coaster at Stratosphere Tower in Las Vegas? Not a theme park, but maybe there's just one-off groups in places like Orlando, Las Vegas, that would want to have a record-breaking coaster. Finally, we had to answer the question, who would build such a huge ride? Well, there may be a few options. RMC, of course, is famous now for its T-Rex track, yet to be seen built, but it seems like it could go up to 500 feet. With the success of the Raptor coasters, maybe we could see an RMC T-Rex coaster built at 500 feet. Another group, Intamin, having experience building roller coasters of 300 feet, of 400 feet, and now working on the Falcon's Flight roller coaster, Intamin seems well equipped to build a 500-foot coaster. Another intriguing thought would be the manufacturer Zamperla possibly building a 500-foot coaster. Of course, this wouldn't be within their historical wheelhouse, but with rumors of their new Lightning train being used on Top Throw Dragster, perhaps we could see Zamperla push the boundary and open the world's tallest roller coaster. So what do you think? Do you think that park guests would ride a 500-foot coaster? Would a park ever buy one, or would a manufacturer ever build one? Part of what I wanted to do with this video was to stir up this discussion, hoping that ultimately parks would be reminded that we as fans still want a 500-foot coaster. I can't believe it's been 2 decades since Top Throw Dragster, the first strata coaster, opened, but we still want to go higher and break more records. I would really love to hear your comments down below. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks so much for watching the video. We invite you to please consider subscribing and liking. Thanks so much, and God bless. Bye.